manager in the store is the CEO of their own little company, and so they do a lot of their own workforce planning themselves, obviously with their managers. They have a beautifully clean org chart, no matrices, no weird stuff, and I think a lot of people find that refreshing. I think long term, people at the top of their game tend to veer towards companies that can offer a little bit more of a sustained growth, profitability, regular growth, instead of long nights of panic. Workforce planning, especially for the sake of recruiting and building your sort of recruitment strategy and structure, is a dark art. You could probably pick 2 or 3 departments that are always going to be strong, and that's where you start. If you get those 3 right, the rest will sort of follow automatically. It's not just I can sort of squeeze you like a lemon. We're working together. I make you better as much as you make me better.
Thomas,
yes.
Welcome to the Leaders in Talent podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Thomas, let's dive right in. You have a fascinating career working at large corporates like Shell, TomTom, Getir, Just Eat Takeaway, and you are currently the global head of talent and contingent workforce at Action.
Correct.
The fastest growing discount retailer in Europe.
Yes.
Arguably maybe even the world, but growth is imminent in your career.
Yes.
Today I would really like to talk to you about strategic workforce planning and how you deal with tremendous growth, but also volatility that you've experienced across your career.
Yep.
But before we dive in, can you maybe share a little bit more about Action and why Action is so successful for the listeners that have never heard or have been to an Action store?
Yeah, so Action is a non-food discounter, which sounds like the most boring thing you could ever do, but what I love about it is that they've really made it exciting. So we have a thing where our inventory in stores changes very often, so much so that there's fan clubs online that try to figure out when there's new stuff in a particular new Action store. Yeah. And I think so we've made discount exciting again. Great products, low prices. And I think what made us so successful at that is that we've stayed super true to that. That's been our formula for 30 years. We treat it like something sacred, and we keep it super simple, right? I think most companies, and you've named a couple of them where I've worked, where when you experience hyper growth, you tend to make life more difficult for yourself. You start doing acquisitions, you think you can create other product lines, all that type of stuff. Your organization becomes complex and matrix and all of that type of stuff. Yeah. Not for us. We keep overhead low, store is king, and we run everything from one place and turn it into a science.
With that rapid growth, opening a store a day, and the expansion and the success that Action has, in your role as the global head of TA, what does that mean for you in terms of planning, in terms of your own team? What's your view on strategic workforce planning?
So I think strategic workforce planning for retail is relatively easy if you grow, because you keep growing and you can be quite aggressive in your lead generation, because if you don't have a job for someone today, you'll have it again tomorrow. But it's about timing it for spots, right? So every time we enter a new market, it takes a while for people to get to know Action and to fall in love with it, right? Like I genuinely think that in most markets, people are in love with Action, and once we've established a certain amount of stores, then we see lead generation become easy, cost per hire come down, just because people start understanding, hey, this is a fun place to work.
Are you facing market volatility, need to hire quickly, or have a team that sits idle? Meet Matcher, your flexible recruitment and sourcing partner. Scale your recruitment capacity up or down without compromising on quality. Trusted by Booking.com, Miro, Heineken, Grammarly, and Deal, Matcher is the RPO disruptor making waves in Europe and the US. For scale-ups and corporates, Matcher covers engineering, go-to-market, and G&A roles. Visit Matcher.io to see how we can support you. That's MATCHR.io.
Hey, and then looking ahead, because you're also responsible for the store, but also for HQ, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit more about like how do you look and how do you balance the two?
They're separate worlds. Right. So the store manager in the store is the CEO of their own little company, and so they do a lot of their own workforce planning themselves, obviously with their manager, and we provide services to them to make it so that they always have great people to talk to, that they have means to make them stay, and to make it easy to hire them. But we're a service to them. They're in charge. Store manager's in charge, and for our headquarters, again, right, we have a beautifully clean org chart, no matrices, no weird stuff, and I think a lot of people find that refreshing.
Yeah.
It all happens in one place in the north of the Netherlands, and it's like, walking around in this sort of busy, buzzy park because everyone's talking to each other, and that's really appealing. So that's the focus, right? Like, how do you make it so that even when you're maybe not in Amsterdam or The Hague, but make it in place, you can become an employer of choice just by virtue of having a more exciting career to offer.
Yeah. Hey, and how's this the same or different at a company like Shell, for example, where you've worked for several years, also in a leadership position, TomTom or Getir, like different types of businesses? Is it similar or is it very different?
So first and foremost, Shell was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, I know.
So I wouldn't want to speak to what Shell looks like today. But at the time, Shell was trending, top employer list for young graduates. And what I've always admired about Shell is that their commitment to building their own talent. So a significant part of their workforce came in as a graduate and worked their way up into that organization. And it was so smart, right? Like, because they built this workforce that all came from the same place, that grew together, so camaraderie. It's a huge company, hundreds of thousands of people, but they still managed to make it so that there was a joint experience. And that made Shell attractive. And obviously at the time, again, big in the market and able to offer growth. I think that's always a bit the case, right? Like, recruitment becomes so much easier if you're in a market where you're offering growth. Some people like growth for the sake of growth, right? Like some of the startups I've worked for, it's just like that aggressive, throw everything at the wall, see if something sticks type of growth. And I think long term, people at the top of their game tend to veer towards companies that can offer a little bit more of a sustained growth, profitability, regular growth instead of long nights of panic. And I think Shell did that well at the time as well. And I think that also, if you look at the thread of the companies I've worked for, I've always tried to find that sweet spot between growth for the sake of it, right? Sort of bloating versus actual growth, because those are the great stories to tell.
Was that similar with TomTom and Getir or different because they were definitely in different phases of their growth cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I want to say, right, like, I think what's hard as a recruiter if you switch jobs is to change loyalties, right? Like, it feels a bit like changing football clubs, and you have to go somewhere else and pick up the phone now and say, no, now I've got the best job. But I genuinely love every company I've worked for because they were each in their own phase. I still admire TomTom today, right? Like, they just came off that high of everyone having that little suction cup box in their car, pivoting into this monster of a autonomous driving software provider. And they did it. And it's not easy to pivot a company like that and remain successful. I was super proud to have worked there. But that was really interesting because we went from completely marketing-driven consumer electronics company to overnight this sort of PhD spin-off software engineering company, right? CMO was always in charge. Suddenly the CTO was neatly in charge, and that meant completely different hiring. At the top, we hired 800-900 software engineers in a year.
Wow.
Insane.
Coming back to Action and the future, how do you plan internally with your in-house team and also like flexible resource allocation? What's your view there, and is that something that you've taken from working in your previous companies, or is that very different within Action?
Yeah, it's funny, because I was driving here and I was thinking about that question. Someone once told me, you have to ask your business what the driver for growth is. I can't for the life of me remember who taught me that lesson, but if they're out there, I'm grateful. Workforce planning, especially for the sake of recruiting and building your sort of recruitment strategy and structure, is a dark art. You can't quite get it right. But there are things you know. Action is predominantly a buying-driven company. We buy great products to sell to our customers. TomTom became a software-driven company. So if I think about my path to growth is going to be volatile, but I know that I'm always going to need to be able to hire the best of the best quick in buying. You could probably pick 2 or 3 departments that are always going to be strong. And that's where you start. If you get those 3 right, the rest will sort of follow automatically. And so that's the approach I always take.
And what is the moment when you bring an external RPO or embedded or agency in? Like, what's your experience there?
So that's not fair, because that's a question that I could spend a week on.
I know, we've had many discussions around this.
But I think in short, there's different reasons. Some companies use RPOs because they don't know what recruitment looks like. Some companies do it because they have a part of their business that's volatile.
Yeah.
So for us, for example, I have the 3 core businesses that I know I have to support well. I do that myself, and I outsource the rest to Matcher, because I need to know that I have a specialist partner that can take some of that volatility away whilst I focus on the core business bit.
Yeah.
That's one. Cost can be one. Sometimes it's brand, right? Like, especially if your HR department isn't the favorite department in the company, it helps to bring in and say, like, look, I found a partner that is a specialist that knows what I'm doing. So there's a million different reasons. I think for me, it's mostly to combat volatility and to make sure that all the work gets done.
And in your experience, like, what are some of the things, like when someone's looking, for example, it's like thinking about one of these factors to bring in an RPO or a better player, like, what is your experience that will set up the partnership for success?
So before you even start talking to partners in the market, articulate your buying reason. So articulate whether you're looking for a brand and specialism, articulate whether you're looking for the catch of volatility. Because if you don't have that clear before you start talking, A, you can never ask the right questions to all of these partners in terms of, are you good at this? But B, you're always somewhere halfway through the program going to figure out that you thought we were saving costs and I thought we were improving quality. So getting your requirements right and then matching the types of partners that you pick to talk to, I think is a really important thing.
Yeah. And then when actually working with a flexible partner, what do you see are some of the key success factors to make that a healthy and good working relationship?
I'm a firm believer in clarity gets you what you want. So be clear goals. I've seen this so often, right? If you bring in an RPO because you're so stressed and your boss tells you have to bring in an RPO, you pick the first one that gives you their business card, and then you put them in the attic and say, right, you're the RPO now. You can't talk to hiring managers. You can't talk to me. You have to report once every fortnight, and you better do it 20% quicker than I did it. That doesn't work. You have to integrate it into your structure. Like properly integrate it. And I think that's the biggest challenge. Because again, most of the times I see companies buy RPO late. They're already behind on vacancy load. The new acquisition is already done. New vacancies have been opened, and then they bring in an RPO, and it's just like, just come in, just help me. Think about what you want to buy. Implement for that. Make sure that you have that sort of space. And I think, I said this to Matcher too, I want to be your favorite customer. So if you buy cheap, you're going to end up cheap, right? Now I'm Dutch, we're a discounter, so I'm hoping we got a good price. But you guys have to make money for you to keep bringing me your best people. It's also why I would do a podcast like this with you, because there needs to be some reciprocity. It's not just I can sort of squeeze you like a lemon. We're working together. I make you better as much as you make me better.
And honestly, echoing those words, for us being on the other side, the clients that we work best with are exactly the clients that treat us as full-on partners, that our success is your success and vice versa. And that's something, even though we recently started to work together, it's something that we've experienced not only from you, but also with the rest of the entire team. And that's absolutely crucial in setting ourselves up for success, but also for a team to really enjoy working for in this case, for Action. What are you excited about? What does the next couple months have in store for you?
So lots more growth. We're a very planned business, so this is budgeting season. So now we're starting to figure out, where's the pressure going to be. I've been with Action less than a year. And maybe it's the honeymoon phase. Maybe I've just found my spot, but I think this is going to be the easiest employer brand to sell, right? Because there's such a deep consumer connection into Action. Everyone understands it, but there's also enough of an element of surprise when I tell them it's 30 years old, it's 12 countries, and it's Dutch, right? A lot of people tend to sort of guess it. Maybe we're French, maybe we're German. No, we're Dutch, and we're right here, and you can be part of it. I think that's so exciting to sell.
Yeah, it's cool. Everyone that I tell, it's oh, we recently started to work for Action. Everyone knows Action, and it has a positive connotation to it. It's absolutely incredible what you've been able to build. And maybe also the story about the CEO, right, started.
Absolutely.
in the store, right?
Stocking shelves and worked your way up. And
worked your way up. Yeah. What an incredible story. Thomas, what's the best way for listeners to connect with you?
If I give you the real answer, I would have to give my phone number.
Yeah.
We're not doing that.
Okay, let's not do that.
I wouldn't be a recruiter if it wasn't LinkedIn, right?
LinkedIn,
so
great.
Just use LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, for trusting us to work together, and I'm really excited to see what the future has in store for Action and therefore also for us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.